Guys, it's good to be back. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Bind, and today I want to talk about some traditional artwork that I recently did for an acquaintance of mine. So stay tuned. So what this artwork is going to be is basically an ink drawing with some watercolor on top. And the topic is, well, it's meant to be a cover for a single of electronic music that is vaguely themed Dancer in a Dark Room. So that is what I was going for here. Also, as always, I'm going to show you what I'm using in terms of media. This is some bamboo fiber paper from German-based manufacturer Hahnenmühle. This is pretty good because the grain is not so strong. It's suitable for aquarelle, watercolor, mixed media, all that kind of stuff. And you can also draw on it with ink fine liners pretty well. So without further ado, let's jump into the real canvas and I'll show you how to draw the main drawing, and then afterwards we'll get into the coloring and into the watercolor. So, see you in a bit. So, as always, you see that I prepared the initial pencil sketch already. And in a second we're going to dive into the time lapse, of course, because else this is going to be much too long of a video. And if you've seen some of my stuff before, you know that I like to do very faint pencil drawings as opposed to traditional comic artists or something like that. I'm not very I don't like to do the blue color as under layer for the main drawing. I like to do just a very faint and fairly detailed pencil sketch, and now I basically draw over this with a fine liner, which is a Faber-Castell 0.1. So the paper I usually draw on is not very big. In this instance, just a little bit more than A4, which it would be a 24 by 32 centimeter piece here. As I said before, is the bamboo fiber with a very unpronounced grain, so very flat paper that can still handle watercolor, which you will see later. So we're doing now the main drawing, black and white drawing, and you can see that I have some more inkers over to the right, which I will need them to put more blacks or fill out some of the shapes. Which usually you should make sure that you're using the same ink so that you don't get color variation of the ink layer, so to speak, especially if you're planning to do the whole thing traditional and not putting color in later on the computer, because then you could fix stuff. But like this, we're not really fixing anything in the computer, apart from some color balancing maybe. So, as always, you saw me starting with something not so important. I told you this before in another video, and I said I would never start with something crucial like the eyes or the mouth, the face, unless I warmed up before on some strokes. In this case, from the hair, from like the ribbon in the hair. So stuff that you can, it's easier to do and more forgiving. And then once I feel confidence is building, then I'm doing those strokes for the more difficult, more crucial stuff. So in this case, I like to blend strokes with blacks. I don't like to do all the hatching, all the striations. I like to do lines. I hate cross hatching, with a passion. So I would never do this, but since there's going to be color, and of course this is style preference. I'm not saying that cross hatching is always bad. It doesn't fit my style for some reason. And this stuff, it develops over a lot of time that you put in, and you find out what works for you and what doesn't. So for me, you can see I like to have the style that breaks up where there's more lighting gathering, like in the middle of the dress. So I will just break up into the white a lot. Also with my single lines, I like to break the lines, because I know that there's going to be color later that is going to hold the piece together. And it's the same for comic styles. I was thinking for a while if I would put like pure black in the background, but then I thought it's kind of too aggressive and also harder to do with the color effect that I'm planning to do here, which is basically a chromatic aberration of some sort. So there will be the white body and the dark background, and then there will be the bleeding of red and cyan, as is the case in the chromatic aberration effect that stems from the camera lens distortion. Maybe you've seen this before. So you get a shifting red and cyan shade there, which I'm planning on using to inform some movement of the character. Also, there is a faint eye sideline, which the idea of that is basically just that is the view, like the sideline of orientation that the performer uses to orientate themselves in the room. So now that this is done, I have to prepare the paper for coloring with watercolor. So what you typically do is you get some tape, some painter's tape, and because I want to have a defined area, like a very don't just want to end the color to end on the paper like bleeding out or something. I want a very refined rectangular shape, and for that this is perfect. Make sure you're not using a tape that is too sticky, ripping off your paper once you remove it. Now setting up the color test. You can see that I have a chart of colors that I made myself that has every color on paper that is in my arsenal. So the thing is, if you look at the colors like that, just out of the box, just the dry tones, they don't look exactly the same as they do on paper. So, and in this case, it's very critical that I get the color right. So I even do another color test on this specific paper to just see how much pigment I need on the paper and when it gets too dark, and in terms of the light, how light or how dark the color should be, and then what will be the secondary tone, because this is a complementary color composition. You have the reds and you have the blues, and this is of course stems from that whole chromatic aberration effect. So I'm testing now what kind of a cyan-like blue I want beneath different shades of red. So I have the magenta, and I also have a brighter type of a red that leans more into the orange yellows, and I think I end up using that instead of the more magenta-like, because on paper the magenta tends to get dark pretty quick, and it's not what I was going for here. So I just thought I'd leave that in here to see what goes usually on behind the scenes in terms of preparation. So this was a special red that I had separate in a tube that I wanted to try it also against that. and see. So I'm just preparing a little drawing. I want a line, and then I want some more ink kind of clocking up on the paper, and then I put the color next to it and see how it behaves. Because this is what you have in the drawing. You have single lines, and then you have black masses, basically areas that you have a more consistent black. So once I'm satisfied with that, I'll then move on to the scary part. And if you ever did watercolor, you know exactly what I mean by the scary part, and that is putting extreme color in a very graphical manner on a white canvas. Because usually how you would start watercolor is not like this. Usually what you would do is you would make a grounding. You would make a foundation of a very light, watery tone to set up the background. You will not just start with a strong color like you see me doing here. And that is because I figured that if I did it the other way around, because remember, the background is going to be very dark, and the theme is denser in a dark room. So if I did the background first, that means I would have to spare out the area where the red and the blue bleeding goes, and then have to add that later. And I think, and that means I will put water that probably loosens pigments from the dark, and it will smear into my bright reds and into my bright cyans. So I didn't want this to happen, and therefore I figured, yeah, you have to go from light to dark in watercolor always, pretty much. Ideally, yes, you start with a background, but if it's not possible or it's too complicated, there is no choice. You have to do it in the order that will result in the cleanest result. So also this is kind of a how would you say that? It's not what your watercolor is for, to make clean graphical style. Watercolor is to make more organic things. So this is a contradiction in a way. It's the word I was looking for. I want to make a graphical illustration with some very floaty and organic color. And at that point, I did not know if it would turn out to my satisfaction at all, right? So also this here now, I'm drawing the offset without any sketch because I don't want there to be extra lines. I want this to be as clean as possible. So this is not planned, and obviously you cannot mess it up. You have only one go at this, or else you have to start over. Of course, you see that I have some paper towel ready, but this kind of an extreme color on paper, even if you suck it up immediately, it will leave a mark. It will not be clean. It will mess up your paper. So you really only have one chance here, which is kind of why this I call this the scary part. And which is also why probably you'll see me hesitate quite a bit while doing this. Even though this is sped up, you'll see I'm turning the paper, and then I'm trying to convince myself to commit to the strokes. So yeah, also trying to figure out where this red is going and what would be a good idea for that, because you cannot really simulate that. Of course, I could draw the whole piece first in digital and then do it analog, but this would I think would be too much, and you cannot plan everything. There needs to be an artistic accident that happens still. You have to kind of trust your expertise and your judgment there, that it will somehow work out, right? So, and of course this is also not, even though the inspiration for this is this lens effect, this chromatic aberration effect, I'm not really doing it exactly the way that it will behave in a photograph, because in a photograph the colors will shift usually towards the same side, and what I'm doing here is I'm shifting them to different sides. So I'm shifting the red to the left of the body, because in RGB what happens is an additive color mixing system. So you add all the lights, you get white, and so if you shift one of the RG or B by a certain increment, that means where they all collide in the middle of the white body, there will still be white, but outside it will produce a rim effect of the color that is slightly offset, right? So usually in a lens, in all the material that I found, the setup was usually pretty much in the same way. But here I'm doing it differently. I'm setting off the reds to the left, and I'm setting off the cyans to the right. Apologies if you heard that that ambulance going by just now. Yeah, that's the way it is. So the reason for that, for the different offset, is that you can see right here in the middle there will be colors that would collide, and I think it's more interesting and to have them shift to different sides. But this was just so you know, this is my artistic choice. It's not something that this is where I deviate from the real effect. And I basically hope that this will produce a kind of a glow of the character later in the dark. But I'm not, as I explained earlier, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out exactly. Because the real scary part comes last, which is applying the dark color, of course. You can see that once in a while I am using the paper towel, but really not that much, because as I said, you cannot really correct too much of this, because these colors are very strong colors for what the medium is. Yeah, sometimes picking the brush tip here, because sometimes individual strands of hair are getting loose and ending up on the canvas. Maybe you know this problem, even though you might have a great brand brush like I do. Yeah, that still happens. And then also, if those strands get loose on the tip, that means it will smear the color, so you have to be careful with that for sure. Now this is the line of sight, and after that I think we're moving straight towards the background. Initially I was thinking, should I keep white in this like virtual line of sight, but then I decided that it would be too much, and it would be too much of the same with the body. I did not want this line to combine with the body. I mean, it's weird enough. You have to kind of get the meta there, that like there's light, virtual light coming out from the eye, which is of course not realistic. That is highly stylized, almost a comic-like approach there to communicating how like the dancer is orientating herself, or you could say scanning the room. Or it's very important in these kind of sports that you have a grounding in your orientation in the room, so that you don't stumble, that you can move. So now the dark is coming, and you saw me mixing it there just a second ago. This is me drying out the sponge, which was not very satisfying to use. It would bleed way too much, so I did not do this. So this is the real scary part, and that is you cannot smear the dark tone now into the bright colors. You have to be really precise, and also you have to be fast, because if you're not fast, then you know what happens. The color will dry and you will get nasty edges from the drying of your color, which of course is not what you want here. You want this to dry in a very even fashion, so that it really looks just like a background. Of course, you can already see that the paper will do its part in the drying effect and produce that kind of a cloud like effect, the likes of which you always get in watercolor, of course. So there's no avoiding that, but that is also, I knew that would happen beforehand, and I think that's what makes the single layered tones also a little bit more interesting, that they are even enough, but they still have some clouding to it that makes them interesting, and you can still kind of feel that this is a handmade thing and not just one layer of computer color that is perfect, right? So same here, have to be fast. The seams cannot dry onto the white, else you will have a problem. So also, if you ever want to do this or emulate this, don't put too much color at once. What will happen is color will gather where the paper is uneven because it's getting wet, and then you will have huge areas where there will be darker color will basically gather and then dry unevenly. So you can't put too much color at once, because I made this mistake a lot in the past. And of course, this also depends on your paper, so also know your paper. Maybe have a spare piece of paper where you try this out. It's always good. Like I did the color test, you can always do this like with the dark color. You can see this kind of happens here. Now I have to paint this area because it was drying. So, and then in a second this will mostly be over with. Of course, as they dry, when wet, the color always looks darker than it eventually will look. So, and then we'll do some in-betweens here, some final touch-up, and then we're basically done with that. Now comes the good part, checking if it's dry enough, and then, of course, remove the tape, which if you pressed it good enough on the side that you're painting on, should not bleed, but you have to check this a little bit. You have to really push it in to the fabric where it connects to the painting. So now this is the final image. Of course, went through a clean scan, and then I tuned the color of the paper so that you can kind of still see a little bit of the grain, and also as where the black ink is not completely losing all its detail, and then a little bit of saturation for those colors. Tuning, actually that depends on the scanner. My scanner puts out a lot of saturation, so I actually had to desaturate this image in order to look like this. But of course it still looks more saturated and more clean than it did in the video just now. And that is of course because I have to tune the lighting of the video so that you can see everything, even the table and the skin color and all of the pigments. So it's near impossible to tune the video so that you have a a clean white on the paper and that you have the most popping colors. If I did that, it would be overexposed a lot. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We did this all the way to the final image, which I will link you in the description down below. You can download this. Of course, only personal use, no commercial use. But anyways, then you will see also the full quality of the image, which is scanned with my Epson Beat 39 great scanner, Jeep 2, and I use this a lot to digitalize analog images. So let me know what you think about this process, Dancer in the Dark, with chromatic aberration, done analog, done by hand with watercolor. It's something unusual, I'm quite aware of that, but then again, I think I like of thinking of stuff that is not so run-of-the-mill, boring, that, yeah, I like to switch it up a little bit and think of something new. Of course, on the other hand, it can't just be new and different for the sake of it. It needs to have a concept underneath. In this case, the concept is pretty simple. It's this chromatic aberration effect, usually produced by lens distortion on the rim's side edges of the camera lens, and that is, yeah, supposed to be hinting at the movement and at some distortion and some energy of movement there in the image. So hope you like it, guys. See you next time.